Discover a community of people who are curious about our world and proud of Wisconsin ideas. Discover the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters. Since 1870, the Wisconsin Academy has been a place where people can connect with experts and learn from each other. Our public programs celebrate creativity and achievement, amplify ideas that inform and empower, elevate our capacity to thrive, affirm the values of the sciences, arts, and letters. We want to be your place to celebrate, connect, and learn. Join us and share our vision for a brighter future inspired by Wisconsin ideas. The Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters. Ideas that move the world forward.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erica Monroe-Kane, and I'm excited to be here with you today. I'm the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Academy, and I am wearing dark statement eyeglasses. I have red lipstick, black jacket, and a white shirt that always reminds me a little bit of Benjamin Franklin. We're giving our visual descriptions today for those among us who may not be able to see their screens as easily as others. So that is, and I'm coming to you from the Wisconsin Academy offices, but I do have a blurred background. Before we get started, I would like to share an acknowledgement. The Madison office of the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation knows as Dejope, which translates to 4 lakes. We recognize and respect the sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, as well as the 11 other First Nations who are caretakers and stewards of the place we now call Wisconsin. I also want to thank many of those nations and individuals who informed this report and recommendations and have been wonderful partners and collaborators on the other work that the Academy does. To learn more about the Native Americans of our state, I recommend the book Indian Nations of Wisconsin, Histories of Endurance and Renewal by Patty Lowe, who is an enrolled member of the Bad River Band of the Lake Superior Ojibwe and a professor at Northwestern University. Patty Lowe is also a fellow of the Wisconsin Academy. A little bit about the Wisconsin Academy. As you saw from the video, Wisconsin Academy creates opportunities for people to connect, learn, and collaborate to improve life in Wisconsin. We showcase contemporary Wisconsin art at the James Watrous Gallery. We examine science and culture in the Wisconsin People and Ideas magazine, and we explore pathways to the sustainable future through the climate and energy initiatives. The programs and events provide opportunities to learn and explore while making connections with the curious and creative people across Wisconsin. We help create a better world by connecting Wisconsin people and ideas. You'll hear more about that and the work of the climate and energy team as I hand it over briefly to my colleague. Let's get started with the official briefing. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the 2022 briefing on the newly released report, Wisconsin Forested Lands, Opportunities for Carbon Sequestration and Storage. This report is the result of a 7-month effort by climate and energy team to synthesize the thoughts and perceptions of foresters and landowners across Wisconsin on carbon sequestration and storage. Through this project, the team spoke with 57 individuals representing different areas of forestry and have identified a path forward that is realistic and achievable for Wisconsin, economically beneficial to the state, and impacts climate change. I would like to give a big thank you to the sponsors of this project. The Climate Critical Lands work would not be possible without the generous support of the Sally Mead Hands Foundation and the McKnight Foundation. The Climate and Energy Initiative is also supported by numerous individuals who donate to the Wisconsin Academy. Thank you for your support and for your leadership. So many have been a part of supporting this work and have paved the path for the Wisconsin Academy to move forward in collaboration and partnership. So thank you very much. Other Wisconsin Academy staff on today's webinar are Matt Raisin, Utica Sharma, and Jess James, who will be helping provide technical assistance. I will currently hand it over to Lizzie to kick off the briefing today. Lizzie?
Hi, hi Erica. Thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, my name is Lizzie Condon. I'm the Environmental Initiatives Director here at the Wisconsin Academy. I am coming to you from my office at home. I have a green background with a crocheted lion head and a plant. I'm wearing a dark blue collared shirt and green glasses. So yeah, it's nice to see everybody. Before we get started with the briefing, there's a few technical tips I want to remind you of if you are new to the webinar format. If you have a question, which we definitely welcome throughout the webinar, please put it into Q&A. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. We are mostly going to be answering questions at the end, but feel free to ask them throughout. The folks who are on this call will also be monitoring the Q&A. And if it's a simple question with a quick answer, we may decide to just answer you by typing in an answer, and that will be shown to everybody. If you have a technical issue, like if you can't hear me or I don't know, if there's some other issue going on, please use the chat function. You can message the hosts and panelists, and we will do our best to help you with that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Climate Critical Lands briefing for 2022. Other folks who are part of our forestry subgroup that are on the call today are Paul Cole, Melissa Johnson, Jeff Mears, Adina Rissman, and Andy Stolman. So they're hanging out in the background. They will come on at the end, but if I say something wrong, which is possible, they are going to pop up and correct me or let me know if I've forgotten to make an important point. I don't know if you can tell, if you have heard me before, I'm quite sick today. So Jess James, who is the coordinator for the Climate and Energy Program, will also be hopping in to relieve me. So yeah, thank you so much, Jess, and to everybody on our subgroup, everybody who's here today. And once again, I want to thank the Sally Mead Hands Foundation and the McKnight Foundation for supporting this work. It's been a really fantastic opportunity for me personally. But I also think that we have come up with some great recommendations that will move us forward in climate change action. A little bit of background on this report. I'm going to give you a little bit of background and then talk to you about how we actually conducted our research for this report, and then I'll talk about the recommendations. So when I started this job in late October of 2021, I was given this report, Carbon Storage in Wisconsin's Landscapes, Identifying Priorities and Potential. This is what we kind of call our Climate Critical Lands first report. A follow-up to that report is what we just released today, Wisconsin's Forested Lands Opportunities for Carbon Sequestration and Storage. So this first report took a broader overview of natural and working landscapes in Wisconsin, including forests. And then we decided to take a closer look at forested lands in particular. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why. First, the goal of this project is to advance land-based carbon sinks as a drawdown strategy in Wisconsin by developing a detailed policy and management roadmap to protect carbon sequestering landscapes, especially in forests. This report identifies policies, practices, and ways to incentivize near-term action while laying the groundwork for a scalable statewide mosaic of resilient carbon sequestering forested lands in Wisconsin. So that was our goal. We have assembled a great team of folks in our forestry subgroup. Not all of them are here on the call, but most of them are here today, really guiding and advising us on the best ways to identify recommendations. So thank you so much to all of our subgroup who has been incredibly helpful in this process. When I first started looking into the potential of forests for carbon mitigation, I did some research on natural carbon solutions. So this is a great paper in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. by Griscom et al. Came out in 2017. Natural carbon solutions are solutions that utilize nature. They use natural landscapes, and if these natural landscapes are functioning well, they can sequester a lot of carbon. Natural carbon solutions, according to this paper, can account for 37% of carbon mitigation. So this is a tool that can and should be used in combination with renewable energy and other technologies. This is another figure from that paper. I just want to point out that forests in particular can account for a very large portion of natural carbon solutions. And the other great thing about natural carbon solutions is they come with other benefits. So you can see here forests, by protecting forests, we're not only sequestering and storing carbon, we're also improving air quality, increasing biodiversity, and also improving water and soil quality. I know that a lot of folks who are on this call already understand how this works. I just think this is really fascinating, and I wanted to reiterate how trees sequester and store carbon. I didn't really get this until I was teaching it in graduate school. Trees grow by turning air into mass. So they take carbon from the air and they turn it into biomass. They turn it into leaves, stems, roots, trunks, wood, and they hold it and store it there. I just think that that is so incredible that there are trees that are breathing and building themselves. So that is the big way that we think about how trees sequester and store carbon, is through living biomass. They also, carbon is also stored in soil. So it moves from that living biomass into below ground biomass and soil. It also is stored in litter, in downed and dead trees. And something that I really didn't think about a lot until I started diving into this project was that harvested wood products can and do continue to store carbon. So one big reason why we decided to dive more deeply into forests in Wisconsin is because we have a lot of forests. We have a really great forested resource. So this is looking at carbon density in the coterminous United States. And you can see, especially northern Wisconsin right here, has quite a bit of stored carbon, or carbon density. And that comes from our north woods, from our forests there. In Wisconsin, we have about 17 million acres of forested land. And so you can see here, all of this green is forest. Every single county in Wisconsin has forests, but the greatest concentration of forested land is in the north woods, is in the northern third of the state. Something that I learned through the research for this project is that the majority of forests in Wisconsin are owned by private individuals, and most of those own less than 100 acres. Most of those are small scale family owned forests. I know that if you work in forestry, that's something that is really well known, but it's actually not well known for those of us who have a background outside of forestry. So this is just showing those forested ownership types. And this is something that we looked at closely when we were thinking about who do we want to talk to get information for this project. And I'm going to have Jess hop on and talk to you a little bit about what methods we use to conduct our research. Thanks, Jess.
Yep, great. Thanks, Lizzie. Hi, everyone. As Lizzie said, I'm Jess James. I'm the Climate and Energy Initiatives Coordinator. Going along with the visual descriptors, I have long brown hair. I have a blurred background right now with a navy blue long sleeve shirt on. So our methods for this report and project as a whole, in collaboration with the forestry subgroup, was using a snowballing sampling effect. And so we took recommendations from our subgroup of individuals we should talk to based on the previous chart. and reached out to all these folks. And with our overall list, we contacted roughly about 200 people to set up focus groups and individual interviews and collect some written responses. So our 5 focus groups that we had, and each one was 2 hours long, with about 5 to 10 individuals each, focused on staff from the DNR, tribal nation foresters, small scale landowners, which was less than 700 acres, county employed foresters, and then employed urban foresters, as well as some volunteers within that as well. We also received a written response from the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest and really appreciate the time and energy they put into that. And then on top of our focus groups, after we wrapped those up, we jumped into individual interviews to dive into more information, to ask specific questions relating to building codes and property tax and other specifics that we wanted to gather from the focus groups. And with the results of those interviews, we actually spoke to 33 organizations in total, which Lizzie will jump into right here.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I just want to move backwards a little bit and just talk about this diagram right here. Jess and I used a program called Mural to take notes and capture people's thoughts. We were asking questions of foresters about different methods that they could use to increase carbon sequestration and storage. And they also talked to us about why or why not they would be able to take those management actions. So really interesting discussions that we had with our focus groups, and we really appreciate everybody who participated. We also did individual interviews. All in all, we ended up speaking with 57 people representing 33 organizations. These included nonprofits, state, federal, and tribal, I think, and municipal governments, private organizations, carbon developers, foresters, higher level managers in forestry, folks who do research, people who work in building codes, people who source wood. So this was really eye-opening, and we heard a lot of repeated themes throughout. I just wanted Jess also to talk about some of the themes that we got from our focus groups before we jump into our recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. So this table specifically is on page 11 of the report. And this is one of the questions that we asked our focus groups was, what is your top 3 management goals that you have for the land and area that you actively manage? And so from our focus groups, we actually saw a lot of similarity in between the small scale private lands, county lands, and state lands, with some differences between the tribal lands and urban lands. And I just want to emphasize right off the bat that these were the top 3 only because we asked them to prioritize them. Every single one of these focus groups expressed care and compassion for these other areas that they focused on. And on page 11 of the report, you can actually see the full list of what the individuals listed throughout those conversations. But really notably, I'd like to point out that urban lands, one of the key concerns that they had was public safety, which I thought was a really interesting component of urban forestry that didn't show up in any of the conversations that we had with other focus groups as well.
Thanks, Jess. I will say that we know that other foresters and other ownership types care about public safety, but it is a particular concern in urban environments. For those of us who live in Wisconsin, which is probably most people on this call, you may have been impacted by the recent storms that came through, and trees were definitely impacting public safety at that time, something that I'll touch on in a bit later. Excuse me. Thank you so much, Jess. So I'm going to dive right into our recommendations. The first recommendation, and I might argue that this is our most important recommendation, is that Wisconsin DNR's silviculture handbook and guidance should be revised to include recommended management strategies for carbon sequestration and storage in Wisconsin forests. This could be a new chapter, it could be embedded throughout the handbook, but many people that we spoke to when we asked, where do you get information? how do you make decisions about how to manage your forest? They pointed to the Silviculture Handbook, which is, like I said, published by Wisconsin DNR as their #1 resource. This is where they go to when they have to make decisions about management of their forested properties. And as of right now, that handbook does not have guidance for sequestering and storing carbon, if that is a goal that a forester has. Without this information, basically, a lot of the other recommendations in our report can't happen. So this is our #1 piece of advice. The DNR Silviculture Handbook is a living document that is frequently revised. There are revisions happening all the time to reflect recent research and new trends, new management goals that people have. And so, yeah, we think a subgroup should be formed to look at doing this set of revisions. Recommendation 2 is another big one. This is the recommendation is to create a Wisconsin Forest Carbon Partnership to gather and distribute information about carbon sequestration and storage, and to provide a forum to share ideas, information, and foster collaboration across agencies and organizations. So in addition to needing information in the Silviculture Handbook, a lot of folks that we talked to said, you know what, we want to do this. We want to increase carbon sequestration and storage on lands that we manage and through forestry, through wood products and other things. But this requires collaboration across many sectors of forestry. And forestry is a huge industry in Wisconsin. So folks that we talked to said, we want to do this, but we don't really have a platform where folks who have the same goal can come together across the industry to collaborate together. There are lots of examples of partnerships where many different organizations come together for a common goal. And so we're recommending the creation of this new partnership. Under this partnership, we have a few priorities that we think are important. So this partnership should work together to create a set of priorities and goals for carbon sequestration, storage, and forestry in ways that provide additionality and verifiability. I'm going to get into this a little bit more later, but many people that we spoke with expressed concerns that we need to make sure that the actions that we're taking to sequester and store carbon through forestry are truly creating additionality, that they really are contributing to carbon mitigation and not just continuing business as usual. We also want this partnership to prioritize job creation in the forestry sector and ensuring that changes to Wisconsin forestry with a shift towards carbon sequestration and storage are economically beneficial to Wisconsin communities. And from the many conversations that we had, we believe that this is possible. We also want to ensure justice and equitability in participation, discussion, and proposed actions. Making sure that all Wisconsinites have access to the many benefits of forests, and also making sure that any actions that are being proposed are beneficial to the environment, to air quality, water quality, soil quality, and to biodiversity. This is continuing recommendation 2. This partnership should focus on a few different areas. They should provide training, education, and communication. One thing that we heard from a lot of folks is that the best way that they can learn and communicate with each other is through in-person field trips. I'm saying this to you from a webinar, but this is something that a lot of foresters especially like to do. They like to meet together, walk through the forest together, and see management practices in action. We also heard that foresters and others who work in forestry really like to receive their communications in the form of like short fact sheets, and these need to come from trusted sources. So folks like the Council on Forestry, UW Extension, folks that they're used to talking to that are very active in forestry already. These are the folks that they want to hear from. This group should also provide training opportunities for foresters, extension agents, and others. Basically, they should be training the trainers, training folks who are going out into these communities and can educate people on the ground about best practices for increasing carbon sequestration and storage. We also recommend that this partnership provides training to certified plan writers for the managed forest law. So if you're not familiar with the managed forest law, maybe during the Q&A, we can talk a little bit more about it. We definitely have folks on our subgroup who are experts or who know much more than me about managed forest law, but certified plan writers for managed forest law will work with private individual landowners to create plans for their properties. And after they create forest management plans, these private landowners are then granted tax benefits. We think that these CPWs, they have to go through mandatory training, and they should be provided training on ways to increase carbon sequestration and storage. This partnership should also look at, conduct a research project, probably in partnership with the university, on the full impact of forestry on carbon emissions. Folks especially talk to us about there being a lot of potential to decrease carbon emissions in forestry through increased efficiency of logging, trucking routes, potentially moving towards electric vehicles. There's a lot of potential there, but there may be some guidance that can be provided by a study. We also think that this partnership should look at carbon credits and their potential to mitigate carbon emissions through forestry. When I was doing this research, I tried to find information on like the number of acres or the number of projects that are enrolled in carbon credits in Wisconsin, and I couldn't find that information. So I would want this partnership to inventory that and to look at the potential that carbon credits can have and under what conditions they are appropriate for forestry. We also identified a couple of task force activities that this partnership should take on. One is looking at agroforestry. This is a nice sketch provided for us by the Savannah Institute, which is a nonprofit in Wisconsin that is doing a lot of work right now in agroforestry. Agroforestry is kind of the marriage between agriculture and forestry. It's taking forestry techniques and implementing them in an agricultural setting. So it could be planting row crops, it could be planting a riparian buffer. But lots of people that we talked to said that we should be doing more agroforestry. But there was a lot of confusion over who has ownership over that. Is it DATCAP, is it DNR, or is it a potential task force that would combine both groups? And there's a lot of potential in agroforestry. We just need some more coordination. This task force should also look at the current potential of Wisconsin, the Wisconsin forest products industry. This is just a map from DNR of different mills all around Wisconsin, different types of mills. We should be promoting durable Wisconsin wood products. We should be looking at the existing market. And the task force should also look at upcoming technologies, new types of wood products that can store carbon and may be advantageous to us economically. Lastly, this partnership should also leverage funding and investment. So one thing that we pointed out in the report is that this partnership could create a regional conservation partnership program through USDA and NRCS. This could open up funding that could be available to partners to fund a lot of this work. There are other avenues that this partnership could explore as well. Recommendation 3 is to communicate to institutional investors about the opportunity to include Wisconsin forest carbon credits in their investment portfolios. I learned through the process of this research that large-scale landowners in Wisconsin, timber investment management organizations, and others, they are invested, or they're helping others invest in forests. Historically, that investment would have generated a return on timber, but these days, a lot of those TMOs are investing in carbon credits. These large-scale corporate landowners in Wisconsin, of all the ownership types, they are the most active in the carbon market. They're already doing a lot of this work, and investment in the carbon market may be really beneficial to mitigating climate change because it's preventing conversion of forested land. Folks who are, who have pensions or other investments may not realize that they're actually invested in carbon credits in Wisconsin. And we would like to communicate that to those folks and let them know that that's something really positive for the environment. Environmental social governance investing is getting really popular right now. So that could be a way to fund carbon credits on corporate lands in Wisconsin. Recommendation 4 is creating a carbon demonstration forest site run by Wisconsin DNR. This could take a lot of different forms. It could be, converting agricultural lands to a tree stand, kind of like what is depicted in this picture. It could be an old growth forest that is storing a lot of carbon. There could be multiple carbon demonstration sites in Wisconsin. We would like for there to be at least one, and we would really like this carbon demonstration site to focus on education. There can be field trip opportunities for foresters. As I said earlier, foresters expressed that they really like to learn through in-person field trips. They could come to a carbon demonstration site and learn about different techniques for increasing carbon sequestration and storage through forest management. And we also think that this should be open and available for the public to explore as well. There should be some interpretation there for folks to come and learn about Wisconsin's forests and how they can contribute to climate change mitigation. Recommendation 6 is to explore the potential of making carbon a commercial timber product under Wisconsin law. This is something that has been talked about. It's kind of been in the ether for a while. I'll just say that this is complicated. So some folks have brought this up as a way to kind of pivot managed forest law to focus it more on carbon. From the discussions that we had, a lot of folks that we talked to felt that we actually don't need to make any changes to managed forest law in order to focus more on carbon. So there is the potential that we could leave managed forest law alone. We could modify it in this way. A number of folks suggested creating a parallel program, a tax incentive program that would focus solely on carbon. But another law that this impacts is the County Forest Administration Law, which is State Law 2811. This is the statute that describes the administration of county forests, which include multiple uses, starting with optimum production of forest products. If carbon is a forest product, that may help shift county forest managers more towards carbon sequestration and storage. Again, we recommend that this be explored further. Recommendation 7 is adopt the tall mass timber provisions in the 2021 International Building Code into Wisconsin's Commercial Building Code. Mass timber is a engineered wood product. It's made through a number of methods, but it's basically kind of like panel sheets of wood that are glued together and can create really sturdy building materials. There are other cities and states across the US that have adopted this tall mast timber provision. Wisconsin has not done that yet. But at the same time, we also have the tallest mass timber building in the world. It's right here. It's called Ascent Milwaukee. So you may or may not have seen it in downtown Milwaukee. It is 25 stories, 284 feet tall, and it is made of structural mass timber. So this depiction on the left is like what the inside of this building looks like. And because we have not adopted the tall mass timber provisions, the architects and owner of this building really had to take it upon themselves to do 2 years worth of testing to seek approval for this. I think that we should learn from what they've done and really consider adopting the tall mass timber provisions. Mass timber, it has a lot of potential to store carbon. I realize that for a lot of folks, the idea of wood buildings can be a little bit scary from a fire risk perspective, but there's been a lot of testing done on it to ensure that it is safe and it is much less carbon intensive than other building materials like steel and concrete. I also want to point out that unfortunately, all of the mass timber wood for this project was sourced from Europe. And that's because we don't have locally made mass timber manufacturers. Especially we have one in Wisconsin, but they don't make the type of mass timber that was needed for this project. So there's a lot of potential there. Maybe when Andy comes on, he can talk about new forest products that are being developed. But yeah, there's a lot of potential for Wisconsin to get in on this industry. Recommendation 8 is to give preference to proposals for Wisconsin state and municipal building construction that incorporate the use of Wisconsin sourced and manufactured durable wood products. This is a picture of the most famous building in Wisconsin. We're not saying that this needs to be torn down and replaced with a wood building, but when municipalities and state buildings are putting out bids to architects and others, those architects that are incorporating Wisconsin sourced wood should be given preference. And this is a way to keep carbon that has been sequestered and stored in living trees in Wisconsin, to keep it stored as a durable wood product for a longer lifetime. This is related. Recommendation 9 is to provide guidance to municipal forestry departments to prioritize finding the highest use for urban trees that must be removed. So this is a grocery store in Madison that I go to quite a lot. It's Festival Foods on East Washington. These pillars here are made out of ash trees that were harvested from Tenney Park, which is like just a mile or so away. They were going to be pulled down anyway, I think probably for emerald ash borer reasons. Excuse me. And now they're structural round timber that was installed by a local Madison company called Whole Trees, and they're still sequestering carbon, and they're beautiful. So I think that there's a lot of potential for Wisconsin durable wood products to be incorporated more into buildings, and a great way to start is through having municipal forestry departments trying to prioritize keeping wood as wood and not turning it necessarily into wood chips, which are store carbon for a shorter amount of time. I thought about this a lot during the storms that we had here in Madison a couple weeks ago, and we had all these ash trees and other trees coming down. And this is the final recommendation. provide incentives to help saw and pulp mills convert to waste biomass fueled wood kilns and create biomass cogeneration plants. So if you follow renewable energy trends, you may know that Europe uses biomass to create a lot of its electricity. And they do consider it to be a renewable form of energy because a tree can be regrown. Here in Wisconsin, we don't really have like a big biomass electrical generation industry, but there is potential. And we talked to mill owners who take the waste biomass from their facilities. So this is biomass like twigs, smaller amounts of wood that can't be used, and they would have to get rid of anyways. They burn it, and it creates heat that they need to as part of the process for drying lumber and drying paper. And at this cogeneration facility, which is in Rothschild, Wisconsin, it's attached to the Domtar pulp mill. In addition to providing heat using waste biomass from the pulp mill, it also provides all of the electrical needs for the pulp mill as well. So it's saving money for the pulp mill. They don't have to import electricity, and it is a renewable form of energy. So we recommend providing tax incentives, grants, other means to increase the use of biomass fueled wood kilns and cogeneration plants in Wisconsin. Those are our 10 recommendations. I would like to invite our subgroup members who are on today to hop on. I'm going to stop my screen share, and we do have some questions that have come through. So one question is there a way to make higher carbon offset payments to landowners using best practices to increase carbon sequestration in the future? This is pretty open-ended. Higher carbon offset payments. This could come in a lot of different forms. Does anybody want to take that? Andy, can you take that? Yeah.
Yeah, I can try. So, yeah, it's sort of a hard question to get at. I think that depending on which program you're going with, they have different ways of structuring what those fees are and how it works. I mean, there's some concern, obviously, that some places you're not actually changing anything, as Lizzie mentioned, not having a value add for some of these programs. So I think what needs to happen as part of the partnership is to make sure that the best information is out there about what are the costs and benefits of these different programs, what are their advantages and disadvantages, and what do they actually have as an impact. So I think that partnership maybe can help to get more information out about all the different programs and see where they're going in the future. And I don't know if Adina has a thought that you would want to add on there.
Sure. Thanks, Andy. Just to say that some of these projects are piloting more work in Wisconsin in this next year with smaller forest landowners. So these programs exist in many places. They are becoming more common and more prevalent, really even just starting this year. The prices have been varied, but are going up. But some people say they would need to go up quite a bit to compete with other more traditional forest products. So it kind of varies in terms of what you might get. And we'll see what those carbon markets continue to do in the future as well.
Oh, sorry, I'm muted. Thanks, Adina and Andy. Adina, this may be a question for you. What % of logged trees winds up in forest products? So I don't know if they mean durable forest products, but yeah. What % of a tree?
I don't know the number on that. I'm not sure if somebody else knows the answer. That would be a good thing. I don't know, Lizzie, if there's a chance to look up some answers and get back to folks at a later time or send a follow-up. But certainly, first of all, it depends. I mean, for those kind of new to thinking about the industry, a lot of timber products in Wisconsin go into pulp markets. Those are not really storing carbon, right? They're kind of a shorter term product in paper or pulp. And some of those markets have really increased as people are getting a lot of packages, let's say, from being shipped to them through online ordering. A lot of that brown paper, there's a real strong market for. While the glossy magazines have really declined since people, are with COVID, not necessarily going to their doctor's offices and picking up the magazines as much anymore. So we've seen definitely that shift in the economy. When we really think about sequestering carbon, it's really more through lumber. So when we harvest trees and use those boards to build houses, or as you mentioned, Lizzie, even using whole trees or parts of boards that are then glued together as cross-laminated timber. And those are the kinds of products that do store more carbon. Depending on the requirements, that may take large boards, or it could be more available in smaller pieces that could use more of the tree even as limbs get smaller. So I imagine it will vary a lot, but certainly a lot of the biomass is in some of those smaller limbs and twigs that aren't going to be utilized. There were some efforts for whole tree harvesting, but that really declined in the state as well.
Okay, thanks to Dina. Okay, Nancy asked, do you have any recommendations for landowners who are interested in managing forests for wildlife habitat and aesthetics? How might they better manage them for carbon? Are there incentive programs that could encourage this, like with conservation easements? Maybe we'll just do the first part. Do you have recommendations for landowners who are interested in managing forests for wildlife habitat and aesthetics that also want to increase carbon? Paul, I want to ask you about that because this is something that we've talked about a decent amount.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of ways to manage for wildlife and aesthetics, I guess. Most foresters out there can manage that way too. It doesn't have to be a boards and cords run. It's just a landowner's objective, and that's what we try to manage for. I think that if you're looking for incentive programs and things like that, NRCS CSP program would fit this perfect. They were called CAP plans, but they do have those that are written management plans for specific wildlife or wildlife category needs and things like that. So you can get actual management plans written with incentive programs through the NRCS. As far as incentivizing carbon, I think that was one of our recommendations, is try to figure out a way that management objectives to store more carbon could be incentivized. I don't know that there's a ton of it yet. There's a lot of options that are, I guess, inherent within a different management strategy. But to actually come out and say this incentive is to pay for tons of carbon stored or something like that, I think we're working on that right now. So,
okay,
does that cover most of it?
It was a long question. Sorry, I just clicked done. I'm trying to think about other things that we've discussed over the course of writing this report. We talked about how in the focus groups, even though there was kind of general interest in managing for carbon, carbon was not it was not a top listed like management priority. And I don't know like what I'm asking, but I just want to point out that at the same time, a lot of the top management priorities, like from the tribal nations foresters, they said a top management priority is preventing fragmentation. And carbon sequestration and storage is a huge co-benefit of that. So for some folks, they may or may not need incentives. Their management priorities already align.
Yeah.
Carbon sequestration and storage. So we had a lot of interesting discussions about that. Jeff or Melissa, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, if you've had conversations with tribal foresters along those lines. Okay, sorry. Question from Jane Elder. Where do you see opportunities to drive natural solutions on federal lands, such as national forests and wildlife refuges? I can speak to the conversations that we had with folks at U.S. Forest Service. A lot of the conversations that we had were around the fact that they have these big federal mandates that right now do not include carbon. And so managing explicitly for carbon is something that would be kind of hard for them to do. At the same time, they're doing a ton of research on carbon sequestration and storage, right here in Wisconsin, that provides guidance that can really inform the silviculture handbook. So they should be involved in these conversations. Does anybody else have a comment on that, on federal lands?
I guess I don't, not specifically, I'd say about all lands, but a lot of these management strategies aren't mutually exclusive, like Paul was getting at, and Lizzie, you mentioned earlier with the co-benefits. A lot of times good management for wildlife, depending on what that is, like maintaining snags and down woody debris, that's good wildlife habitat. That's also slowly, it stores carbon for a while there. So some of these things aren't mutually exclusive. And so while you say the Forest Service doesn't specifically have, it's not mandated that they're looking at carbon, a lot of what they do on the national forest actually is either helping to store or sequester carbon, as is a lot of good forest management across the state.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Any other comments? Okay, how can carbon credits be incorporated into forest products like 2x4s or wood doors or furniture? I think that's kind of yet to be explored. I don't know, are any carbon developers looking at that?
I've not heard of anything in that direct area. I don't know if Adina, if you've heard anything there, but interesting thought for sure.
Most of the carbon credits that I'm aware of work by through agreements with landowners for the kinds of forest practices they'll do on their land. Yeah, I'm not thinking of an example that it directly relates to 2x4 specifically or something like that. But I think, as we've talked about, the increased need to use timber products in buildings, if we can do that while also reducing the emissions associated with transportation, for instance, would also be a potential for storing carbon. And those are things that people might be able to get credit for in some way.
I don't know that much about this, but incorporating durable wood products into construction, I think may give you points for LEED certification. So it's not exactly a carbon credit, but it's a different type of incentive. So yeah. Okay, we'll do one last question. Discuss how management of forests for carbon fits hand in glove for management for forest habitat and forest biodiversity. Anybody?
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I can take a shot at that, and other folks might want to jump in as well. I think this is a really important question. In this state, we have quite a lot of middle-aged forests, and we're really short on both our young and our older forests that are really needed for habitat for wildlife. And really, both of those provide opportunities for carbon as well. In our younger forests, we can be sequestering carbon more rapidly. In our older forests, we can be storing carbon and growing some of those middle-aged trees into to older elder stands. So I think those are really important opportunities to be thinking about the potential for older forests in the state, which are very rare, and to be thinking about how do we sequester carbon while also providing wildlife habitat and doing many of the other things that we care about in Wisconsin's woods.
Thank you, Adina. And thank you to all of you for all of your support and guidance through writing this report. Paul Cole especially helped with pushing the report in a good direction. So thank you to Paul and thank you to all of you. I also wanted to thank our focus group participants and interview subjects. We spoke to a lot of different people and they shared their opinions with us. We didn't speak to everybody though. There's always going to be room for improvement that could possibly happen through the Wisconsin Forest Carbon Partnership. We also want to thank our climate critical lands team and the forestry subgroup. We also had additional reviewing provided by Fred Clark with Wisconsin's Green Fire, Matt Dahlman with Nature Conservancy in Wisconsin, Katie Fernholz with Dovetail Partners, and Forrest Jabot with Steigerwald Land Services. So we definitely appreciated all of the feedback that they gave us. Thank you so much to everybody today for participating. I'm gonna have Jess come on to give us a really exciting announcement.
Thanks, Lizzie. Sorry, struggling here with unmuting. Thank you to all of our panelists. Really appreciate all of your time and your effort, along with the focus groups. We at the Wisconsin Academy are very excited to announce, but registration for the 2022 Climate Fast Forward Conference is officially open. This conference is springboarding off of the 2019 conference Climate Fast Forward. That 2019 conference really pulled together thinkers across the state and crowdsourced solutions for climate change solutions. They came up with over 400 solutions and then identified the top 15 through facilitated tracks and conversations. So this 2022 conference on October 17th is really going to take the next step of having these facilitated track conversations to identify what actions are going to move us forward on Progress for Wisconsin. I'm popping the registration page in the chat here, but it is now live and open. We're really excited. We have some fantastic track leaders who are helping shape the conversations leading up to the day of. We have an excellent subcommittee that's working with us on the conference, and a lot of really strong excitement surrounding tribal engagement and then working with young professionals across Wisconsin as well. Our opening speaker for that day will be Matt Dannenberg. He's a tribal liaison with the U.S. Department of Energy. And then the closing keynote of that day to kind of synthesize the ideas from the conference is going to be Dr. Jonathan Foley, who is the executive director of Project Drawdown. So we in general are very excited and strongly encourage you to register. Early bird prices run from today up until August 22nd, and registration will officially close on October 3rd. But really hope to see you there, and thank you everyone for joining us today on this briefing, and thank you again to our speakers. You can see Lizzie and my contact information on the screen here, but please reach out with any questions or concerns you might have. Thanks everyone, and have a good day.